Why are some musicians, both on the world stage and also local heroes, so much more successful than you? To be honest, it's almost never due to any innate natural talent, and instead down to them sticking to a few really simple habits. You see, people often think that achieving success as a musician is all just blind luck. You're either born with this natural gift, or you're not. You're either in the right place at the right time, or you're not. But it's actually by sticking with these habits that musicians create their own luck and get skilled enough that people that haven't seen the hours and hours of practice think it's a gift they're all born with. And luckily, most of these habits don't actually require that much time or effort. Now, the first of these is perhaps the most obvious. Prioritize your practice. When you've had a long day at work or at school and you finally get home, you just want to chill out, maybe put on the TV, watch the new Josh Wakeham YouTube video. And by the time you finish doing that, well, it's getting late and it's probably not fair on your neighbors to start practicing now, right? And then before you know it, a whole week has gone by and you haven't done any practice. I see this time and time again. But successful musicians, and the ones that are going to be successful, always make sure they've got time to practice. The great John Coltrane would go as far as practicing backstage in between his sets. And you can guarantee that Beyoncé doesn't let anything get in the way of her writing new songs. Now, depending on your circumstances, this habit might seem quite hard. I mean, I imagine Beyoncé has people that do her laundry for her, and you and me might not. But the thing is, successful musicians form this habit before they're successful. And if they can do it, so can you. Put aside a regular block of time each day for your practice. And that time is sacrosanct. It's just as important as your day job or your schooling. And to avoid the trap of running out of time before you get to it, rather than waiting until you finish relaxing to start practicing, do it as soon as you get home, or if you can, before you go out in the morning. And that way, you're never going to miss a single day. The second habit is all to do with how we practice, setting goals. When I was a teenager, I was one of the best musicians in my area, and I had so much free time, I'd practice for hours and hours every single day. But despite all that practice, my playing kind of plateaued, and after a while, those musicians who were nowhere near as good as me, well, now they've overtaken me. So I put in even more practice time, but they kept improving, and I was kind of stuck. And then when I got to music college, jazz messenger Jean Toussaint asked me what I was practicing. And I gave him this long, meandering list, and he looked at me and said, pick one of those things. Have it done by next week. And guess what? In that 1 week, my playing improved more quickly than it had in years. You see, although I was spending so much time practicing when I was younger, I was doing so many different things and it wasn't really focused in any way, which meant nothing I was actually working on really had any chance to improve. But by having a more singular focus and setting very specific goals within that, I was able to have every part of my practice targeting that one goal. And when you practice like that, there's no way you won't improve. And if your time is limited, this becomes even more important. If the only practice time you've got is the 15 minutes while your dinner's cooking, well, make sure you're still targeting a really specific goal, and you're still going to see great progress. The third habit is another practice one. Make sure you're working something out by ear every single time you practice. This could be a melody, a chord progression, a jazz transcription, a pop song, anything you like. You see, as a musician, it doesn't matter what genre or instrument you play, your ears are far more important than your technical facility on your instrument. As much as people like me like to bang on about the theory and the technical aspects of what's going on, music is first and foremost an oral tradition. It's ears first, theory later. After all, it's our ears and our oral skills that let us turn what we're hearing in our heads into music. I still remember my first nightclub Ibiza-style sax gig. Now, one of the main things you gotta do on this sort of gig is pick out the parts of a song that will sound good on a saxophone, be that a horn line or a guitar riff. And there's normally a DJ that you're working alongside, and they're remixing everything, so even if it's a song you know, it might not be exactly the same as you're familiar with. And up till this point in my life, I'd always kind of put off learning things by ear because I found it hard, and my reading skills were quite good, so I could always fall back on those, which meant the entire 3-hour gig was an absolute train wreck. I was barely able to work out any of the parts I should play before the songs ended, which meant I spent the entire time just jamming over the songs really badly. I'm surprised I didn't get fired straight away. But now, after making sure I work on my ears every single time I practice, if I'm on a gig and I've got to work something out by ear, well, it takes seconds rather than whole minutes. And musicians far more successful than me do this as well. Every single major jazz musician has worked out by ear a whole load of solos by their predecessors. And I guarantee that every single famous pop singer and songwriter worked out their favorite songs when they're growing up, long before they started writing hits. Now, the last two habits are a bit more about lifestyle than practice. And let me ask you a question. When was the last time you listened to music? And I'm not asking when the last time you heard music was. When was the last time you actively listened to it? These days, music is really easily accessible wherever you are, which is really cool, but it does mean that a lot of the time we've got our headphones on and music's playing, and we're not really paying any attention to it. But successful musicians will always pay really close attention when they're listening to music, the same way that a film director pays really close attention when they're watching a film. The deeper you listen, the more you'll notice in the music. The way the melody is phrased, the way they use accents and dynamics, and that slight change of harmony in the third chorus. And then all of that kind of simmers away in your subconscious, and when you next go to play music, you're able to draw on all of that experience. And that's going to make what you play so much better than the guy that always has music playing, but never actually listens to it. And of course, I don't just mean listening to your favorite albums, the same goes for live music. Which brings me on to habit number 5, being on the scene. When I was at music college, there were a bunch of jam sessions that the other students would go to every week. They'd play, hang out, get to know each other and all that sort of thing. But I was so overly aware of how much catching up I had to do to get anywhere close to these guys' level that rather than going out, I'd just stay at home and practice and feel sorry for myself. And yeah, the practice time was useful, but it meant that by the end of music college, even though I was a decent player, no one really knew me very well, and because of that, they completely rightly weren't booking me for any gigs. To get booked for a gig, you've got to be a decent player, but you've also got to be fun to hang out with. And because I was never on the scene, they didn't know if I was or not. I learned very soon after leaving that by going to gigs and jams regularly, you start to get known, and then gigs and other opportunities start to appear. It might not be immediate, but in time they will come. And this is what I meant earlier by making your own luck. If you're on the scene enough, then eventually you're going to be in the right place at the right time, even if that right place is the exact same jam session you've been going to every week for the last 3 months. And on a grander scale, it's this habit of always being on the scene that made Bruno Mars so successful. He was already well known in Hawaii, but he moved to Los Angeles because he knew it was such a bigger, more internationally influential scene. And if he could be spotted there by always being on the scene, he had such a greater chance to achieve the international stardom that he now enjoys. Now, you might be able to employ all of these habits right away, or you might prefer to get to grips with them one at a time. Let me know down in the comments which approach you're going to take, and for more ideas on how to improve as a musician, check out this video next.